Hi there, and welcome to the Educator's Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world. Conversations where we stay curious for a little bit longer about the issues, challenges, and opportunities which we are facing in our schools and in our communities. Today, we're going to be exploring the skill of empathy with our special guest, Ed Kirwan, founder and CEO at Empathy Studios and Empathy Week. Welcome to the Educator's Corner podcast, Ed. How is your week shaping up?
Hi, Kai. Thank you very much for having me. Very good. Better now that I'm on the podcast.
So we're going to be exploring this skill of empathy today, and we're going to look at things like what is empathy, why it matters, and how we might strengthen our empathy skills, however strong we might think they are. So, Ed, you describe yourself as a filmmaker, a creative, but most importantly, an educator. How would you describe your current mission in education?
Ultimately, my mission is to not just increase, but train the skill of empathy in students and teachers, and more also corporate organisations are catching on to it as well, and really build that skill of empathy so that everyone can ultimately have a better personal and professional life and thrive in their roles, whatever that is.
Okay, so you seem to be very committed to developing this skill of empathy. I guess what was the origin story? I know you're quite interested in the whole concept of story. What sparked between you and empathy?
So my background is studied biochemistry at uni. I spent a year in a lab as part of my placement at the National Institute for Medical Research, which now is the Francis Crick Institute in London, changed name. Wasn't very good at science, actually, and entered the world of teaching. I'd always been surrounded by young kids. My mum was a childminder, so from the age of 2 till actually I was 23 or 4, my mum was a childminder. So every time I went into my home or came back, even when I came back from uni on holidays, I'd be woken up at 6:30, 7 a.m. by 2 or 3 under 3-year-olds. And so I was always surrounded by kids, and teaching was something that I thought I might be good at and might really enjoy. And I did. So I entered the classroom straight after university, loved teaching, and I was teaching in North London. And I mean, teaching is just a world of emotions, isn't it? A world of emotions, and something literally happens every day that makes you laugh, maybe that makes you want to cry, maybe that just drives you insane. That is teaching, and I absolutely loved it. And there's a specific group of boys, and I never used the word empathy actually when I was teaching. So I was teaching between 2014, 2017. But I realized afterwards, reflecting back, that actually I was trying to develop empathy. I was trying to connect using empathy. I was trying to build my skill of empathy, particularly for students that were from different backgrounds to where I was from, or from different cultures, and realised that actually if I could connect with young people better on a personal level, they would do better in my lessons. They would care more, they would come on time, they would hand in homework, they would actually selfishly create less havoc for me. I wouldn't have to chase them for homework. It was kind of a selfish endeavour in a way, right? If I can build this connection, and they really not, it wasn't about chasing them to get them to like me. I always said to them, I don't care really if you like me or not. It would be nice, but I'm here to educate you. I'm here to develop this. I don't need to be a friend, and we have this relationship. But there was a particular group of young men that the school decided to put together, 24 of them in one class. It was a mixed secondary school, 1,600 kids, North London, quite large. And these young men were ultimately failing, both in personal life and in academic, trouble with the police, etc., etc. I play basketball. I'm quite a tall man. I'm 6'5". I'm male, which they unfortunately respected more than female teachers a lot of the time, not all the time, a lot of the time. And it was quite nice knowing that I could always beat them one-on-one in basketball. And they found that a bit of a juxtaposition, because basketball is associated with, hip-hop music and cool culture and Nike and all sorts of things. And I'm this science geeky teacher that's talking to them about, rocks and the reactivity series. But I had this group of young men from the age of, just for year 11, for their GCSE year. And they came up the stairs after their Christmas mocks, all chanting, "You gang, you gang, you gang," up the stairs. And at the time, it was A to U, the grades in the UK. So they'd all failed, they'd all got ungraded. And they found this kind of camaraderie, this group think, this belonging in the fact that they failed. And ultimately, I had to find a way with other teachers as well to tweak something in their head that made them realize that I need to try, because it's much easier to not try and fail and therefore say you didn't try than it is to try and fail and then be embarrassed from that failure. So how could we tweak something? And it all started with knowing, okay, that young man actually has to pick up his two brothers after school, and he's got a single parent family and they all live in a single bed flat. And so saying to him, look, if you need help, if you need to stay here, understanding the little nuances of their lives, what they liked, what they were into, allowed me, I mean, it was still chaos a lot of the time. I stood next to the emergency gas button a lot of the time if we ever did a practical, and at some point had to just demonstrate them because it was too dangerous for them to, like, you know, they were heating up tongs and trying to like scold each other with them sometimes. So it was a chaotic environment, but despite them giving me stick back and everything, they did respect me in the end, and I respected them. And this relationship actually led, with, again, a lot of help from other teachers, to none of them getting U grades. And to caveat that with, one of them was actually in a prison cell the day of his chemistry exam. He'd been arrested and missed his chemistry exam, and then came and said, "Oh, can I retake?" I said, "You really you haven't listened to what I've said all year. If you miss this exam, that's it." But these young men were also completely misunderstood in other parts of the school, in other parts of society. They were seen as a pain. They were seen as, you know, 7 of them at one point were on red report cards for the head teacher, you know, one step from being expelled. But I saw the power of understanding and trying. And also, this is the important thing about empathy. It's not ever, I am fully going to really understand what those young men and their situation have, but I can try. And it's the trying bit that then brings the magic. And if that can be taught and that can be developed, and if they could also themselves have a greater perspective beyond just that pocket of North London where they thought they would stay their whole entire lives, if I'd have got them earlier, would that have made a difference even more? And my sort of hypothesis is yes, it would have. And that kind of is my sort of origin into, wow, empathy isn't just this soft, fluffy, nice to have. There's real science behind it. There's real evidence. And if you could focus on developing that, it could actually change education for the better.
Thanks for sharing that story, Ed. I mean, that sounds like a very powerful story. Obviously, that experience had a huge impact on you, and hopefully had a huge impact on those students. And I guess what I think I might be hearing there is that empathy has got something to do with creating meaningful relationships. So maybe before we go any further with this conversation around empathy, let's do some empathy fundamentals. So what is empathy?
We define empathy as the skill and the ability to understand another person whilst reserving judgment. And I think that bit of like reserving judgment is really important, because we do judge. And I think part of empathizing is actually acknowledging that you've already created a judgment, but you're going to put that to a side. But I would say the one word synonym or definition of empathy, if you take that sentence away and just try and keep it super simple, is understanding. Empathy is understanding. It is not just feeling what other people feel, which is what the sort of Oxford Dictionary definition says. I often say, think about empathy in the definitions as a bit like leadership. If you look up the definition, everyone's got a different definition of leadership. There's different styles of leadership. There's different ways of leading. Empathy is the same. There's different ways of empathizing. There are different types of empathy. There are different definitions. But to keep it super simple, it's understanding. And that comes from a feelings point of view, a cognitive point of view. And ultimately, empathy it can be super complex, but it also can be simple in different scenarios. But we also like to talk about it as a neutral skill. So people often associate empathy with, I need to empathize with someone who is worse off than me, or someone that is completely different to me. Well, actually, you can empathize for someone in really positive scenarios. That's super important. Imagine a child comes up to you, it's been the weekend, over the weekend, they've finally completed their 100-meter swimming badge. And you sort of go, yes, yes, great, great, great. Oh, all the class come in, usher them away, shoo them off to sit. That's great. We can talk about it later. And they've spent 6 months trying to learn to swim. And this has been their big achievement in their head, 100 meters. And you've just gone, yeah, yeah, yeah. Imagine if you actually found some time to really connect and say, oh my gosh, that is incredible. Have you got any pictures? Have you got the badge? Can you show me the badge? I really want to see that. I know we haven't got time now. You need to go and sit down, but we're going to talk about this later because that is amazing. And
Okay.
the difference in the body language maybe for that child and feeling seen, heard, and understood, that is what builds, as you've said, great relationships. So think about empathy as connecting in the good times as well as the bad times. It's also important to empathize with the people closest to you, as it is the people who are most different to you. It really is the fundamental skill that can help us build these human relationships.
How would you say that empathy is different from sympathy? Because I think quite often they use maybe interchangeably. Is there a difference between those two words?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just because they sound similar as well, people think they're kind of related. They're really different. Also, compassion, kindness also get confused with empathy, or interplayed. Empathy, people think kindness, and it's not. But sympathy is really kind of that. And sympathy can also be useful. Sympathy sometimes gets hit on as kind of like the worst thing you can give people. But actually, let's just say someone dies, you do give your sympathies. And sometimes if it's again emotional intelligence is all built into this. If someone dies and your closest friend, their parent dies or something, and you go to them, at that moment they probably don't want you to sit down and for you to be able to understand everything they're going through and you to question them and ask them to talk to you about it. They might just want your sympathies. I'm here for you. I feel really sorry about your situation. That can be useful as well. So sympathy is very much kind of this idea that you are recognizing someone in a more negative state and you give your sympathies. Empathy is the ability to connect and understand, but also is not towards negative or not to, it's both positive, negative, neutral. Is that skill to understand. So they're very different. Compassion is also the ability to act on kind of a feeling towards someone. So compassion is kind of the movement of action. Empathy and compassion get mixed up. They're related, of course. You can empathize, maybe realize someone is in a bad way, and then show them compassion. And then kindness gets mixed up with empathy all the time. And I have a bit of a gripe about random acts of kindness and kindness, kindness, kindness. Great if the person is like you. We were probably taught by our parents, Kai, that treat others as you would like to be treated, and that's great if everyone is like you and I, or likes the same things. But treating other people as you would like to be treated can be dangerous. I like Snickers, but if I give a Snickers bar to someone with a nut allergy, I kill them. So there's this concept of, in the UK, and I know this is across the world as well. I don't know the stats for across the world, but the UK census data, for example, from 2001 to 2021. Neighbourhood diversity has doubled on average across the UK. That is, every place on average has doubled in terms of diversity. In some places, Boston, Lincolnshire, it's tenfold. Slough, it's about sevenfold. In 20 years. This means we are increasing the amount of cultures, languages spoken, religions, creeds, everything in a certain area. And difference creates, or can create, conflict. It can also be an amazing thing to celebrate. The skill of empathy is what allows us to connect and to be able to understand and be able to nurture that. But this idea that that's why we need empathy, and this idea of just kindness for the sake of kindness can also sometimes fall back. I mean, just a very quick story before I end on this point. My science technician, I gave him a bottle of wine at Christmas one time. I said, "Thank you so much, Ahmed. Any science teacher here will tell you that technicians save your life more than once. They prepare everything. They do all the behind the scenes work." I said to Ahmed, "Thank you so much. Here's a bottle of wine." And what I realized is actually, well, he doesn't drink wine, he's Muslim, and he doesn't celebrate Christmas. Now, we laughed about it, of course, but imagine had I got him a box of chocolates, I'd probably saved a couple of quid. I'd have checked them and I said, thank you so much for all of your support. Like, I can't do my lessons without you. You're an absolute legend. Here's a box of chocolates. I've checked. There's no pork gelatin. The halal. Have a wonderful 2 weeks off with your family. That little dial, that little nuance, that little shift in what I've done to just recognize that there's a slight difference between us, and I respect that, and I've given that, or just that extra little knit in the relationship tightens it. That is what these little things that empathy can do in the long term have a massive, massive impact. He is going to have my back. He is going to say yes to a request, even though I should have put it in 4 days earlier. And it's those things that are different. And I want people to think about kindness can be supercharged by empathy. It can be made, both of those were a kind act, giving a bottle of wine, giving a box of chocolates. But the one that had empathy with the box of chocolates, that's the one that solidifies the relationship. That's the one that makes well-being and the school environment and relationships so much better.
We're now going to try and bring empathy to life a little bit and have a bit of fun, I think. We're going to play a game I've just invented called ratemyempathy.com. And I'm going to give you 5 well-known people who are either living today or maybe not. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to ask you to rate their empathy. So 1 is very, very low empathy. 10 is sort of maxing out on empathy. And just as I go through each of these, you don't need to give an explanation. We'll just go through it and just score them. And then we might dig into some of your answers. So number 1, Mother Teresa.
Over a 9.
9. 9 out of 10 for Mother Teresa. Margaret Thatcher.
Probably a 6.
A 6. Donald Trump.
This might surprise you, but I'm going to give him an 8.
Give him an 8. Okay. Steve Jobs.
A 9.
And Taylor Swift.
7, but I don't know why.
Okay. So Mother Teresa came out top at number 9. Maybe that won't surprise people in terms of the reputation that she might have around the world. Now, you said you're going to surprise me giving Donald Trump 8. So let's just explore that response a little bit, Ed. Why have you given Donald Trump such a high score on the ratemyempathy.com scale?
Yeah, and I knew he would have come up. I don't know why. I should have said I'll eat my hat if he doesn't come up. So I think I want to move people away from, again, thinking empathy means good. And there is a dark side to empathy. And it's why we also talk about it as train it as a skill, not just about increasing empathy. So I think Donald Trump is an incredibly clever, intelligent man, despite some of the caricatures of him and the personas that he, I believe, puts on. He understands the voter. So if we take empathy being understanding, he is looking around at the country. He is looking at understanding youth culture. He went on a number of podcasts. He listened to people. I think I saw a clip saying that his son pointed out some of the podcasts he should go on, which was very untraditional. I don't think it had ever been done. And he listened to that and he understood, I can reach people. He understood what a lot of people that maybe don't usually vote care for and spoke in ways that galvanized them to act to vote. So he had a great understanding of whether it's right or wrong, that he was going to do that. And crucially, what's interesting is all of the things that he was signing, I can't remember what you call them now, but the sort of declarations or the
executive orders.
Executive orders, thank you.
Yeah.
That he did. He is writing loads of those last week, knowing that most of them or a lot of them will get blocked. But he understands that at least what he said he would do, he's done, and his voters and supporters will say, he's being blocked by other people, it's not his fault. He is an incredibly intelligent man, but uses empathy for the wrong reasons, which is, if I understand enough information about you or as a group of people, I can actually use that information to benefit my own ego or my own motive. Okay.
And you also gave Steve Jobs the same score as Mother Teresa. So Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, inventor of the iPhone, the smartphone. Steve Jobs, 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Brief explain around that one.
Again, very sort of people in the design world or in creative spaces would talk about empathy mapping, understanding your customers, understanding markets, understanding what they need, not making what you want to make, but making what people necessarily need. And it's quite well documented the way that he took Apple from kind of being a low competitor to Microsoft to actually storming ahead and creating products. And the way that he spoke always about his products was, on stage he would say, "We are here to help educators. We are here to help education. We've created fonts so that designers can do this. We are here to make a better world. Oh, and by the way, we make laptops." He wasn't talking about the product. He talked about what people felt, what they wanted to see, what would help them. He very much understood how customers would do it. Again, same score as Mother Teresa, but very different, right? And again, people will be like, "What? Well, they're not." Steve Jobs maybe wasn't the kindest person, but he had an incredible level of skill of empathy.
And it reminds me of a very famous quote, another great entrepreneur, the great Henry Ford. And he was sort of renowned for saying that if he'd have given people what they wanted, he would have had to invent a faster horse. But he actually understood what they needed, not necessarily what they wanted, and invented the Model T Ford, which was like an affordable mass-produced car, which actually what they needed was a mass-produced car that was an affordable price. And so the great business people of this world understand what people need, not necessarily what they think they want. And perhaps, Steve Jobs probably fits into that category as well. What about Taylor Swift? You're a bit uncertain about Taylor Swift. Is that because you're not familiar with her music, or?
Guy, I have to listen to that every day because my fiance is a Swiftie. To the point we share our Spotify, or we're linked, and I'll be walking down a road and she'll be playing it on Amazon Alexa. So, and it will switch what I'm listening to Taylor Swift. I just don't know that much about her. I think I know enough that she is very incredibly business minded, and I think she has a great level of empathy in terms of understanding her audience and what they want. But I don't necessarily see that her empathy extends to planet, maybe, or other sustainable ventures. I think that's been quite well documented, like how much she flies and sometimes flying across a city which is 10 miles rather than other things. So I think there's empathy for planet and the world, as well as empathy for who you are, which is why I kind of went with a 7. But yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
I might need to do some more research on Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, because she writes, certainly most recently, but I think quite a great deal of her music is about relationships, and she writes about relationships in a way that millions, if not billions, of people seem to be able to relate to. And I just wondered, to be able to do that, she must have a great understanding of how to write music, create art about relationships, which so many people get so engaged with. And I think I imagine she must have pretty strong powers of empathy to be able to
Yeah,
do that.
when no, that you put it like that, yeah, absolutely, actually, and empathy is very strongly related to creativity. So if you increase your skill of empathy, you are going to also increase your level of creativity and innovation, and vice versa. So 100%, I think people that are musicians, that are artists, that are filmmakers, that are painters, that indulge in the creative arts, often have a high level of empathy, and people, I don't know where this quote's from, but I heard it once. Art is a reflection of society. You know,
Yeah,
plays, music,
yeah,
films, they're a reflection of what's going on in
yeah,
society. I think that's probably the best way of describing the arts
yeah.
culture.
And I think, I mean, again, I'm not a film critic or a music critic, but I guess that people like art or music or film or theatre or books or poetry where they can relate to it. They see a connection, and to do that, the creative person needs to have a degree of empathy, unless they're very lucky. Okay, so you touched on something there in terms when you talk about D- Donald Trump, that maybe having a lot of empathy is not always a good thing, or it depends within the context within which you use it. And I guess when I was working through my career, when I was a teacher, when I was a head of department and a school leader, but not a head teacher, I was worried, and some people might be skeptical about people who know me might be skeptical hearing me say this, but I was a bit worried that, well, I'm not a bit worried. I was significantly worried that maybe I was too empathetic to be a school leader. I would worry that I would actually find it very difficult to make some of the very difficult decisions that leaders have to make, and maybe I was too empathetic. So, can you be too empathetic, do you think?
We get this when we do trainings. We get this question all the time, or someone comes up to me about it. And I think, firstly, a lot of people confuse empathy with emotional contagion, and that links back to the feeling what others feel definition. So I get people come up to me and go, I'm always crying at TV, or I'm always, I just feel all the emotions that all my friends go through. Often what they're talking about there is emotional contagion, right? I see you cry, I cry. But doesn't necessarily mean it's empathy, because do you have the genuine understanding of what that person is actually feeling? Because you could see someone cry from afar and think, oh my gosh, they're really sad, and they could be really happy. So, that's that one part of that. And then when it comes to leadership, we talk a lot about empathy and leadership. Empathy is about understanding. So remove it from kindness again. And empathy is understanding and that, situation that you're in. Maybe someone's underperforming. Maybe there's a safeguarding issue. You still, as a leader, have to follow certain protocols and certain processes, because that is what is right for the school or the organization or whatever it is, group that you're in. And I think empathy and leadership are not exclusive. In fact, they're fundamental. You have to understand your workers. You have to understand the people around you. But as a leader, you also need to understand you have to make difficult decisions. This is where the emotional intelligence part comes in. I think we like to talk about things separately as if they're not interdependent. But actually, empathy, the reason we focus on the skill of empathy is because it underpins all other skills, but also it's wrapped amongst them with emotional intelligence. So, understanding someone who's very nervous that is underperforming, starting with you're underperforming is not a great way to start a meeting, and is not particularly empathetic. But starting with, hey, what's going on? I've noticed that you're not performing as we would expect in this school. What is there that we can do to support you? What's going on? If you feel comfortable to share. But also setting out that if this continues, or if something happens that's happened, the answer is that you're going to be, we can't have you here anymore. So you can make some very difficult decisions, like letting people go, or having to step up in certain times to do some things that are really difficult. And everyone hates those conversations. Everyone hates difficult conversations. What the skill of empathy allows you to do is understand how to navigate that with that person. So it's not a blueprint. Okay, in this situation, I do this. Empathy is the understanding that in this situation, what is right for that person. When I was at uni, I was playing basketball, and I had an assistant coach, the assistant head coach. He was the coach of the Army men's basketball team, and he was stationed nearby, and he would, every now and then, this was 2010 to 2014, so every now and then he'd be like, right lads, I'm off to Afghanistan or Iraq he was like an engineer in the army. But he once pulled me aside at half time in the game, and I was playing rubbish, and he stood, a centimetre, 2 centimetres away from my face. He was a lot shorter than I am, but he still managed to basically spit on my face as he was shouting. He was like, what are you doing? Why are you playing the way you're playing? What are you doing? Why are you scared of the ball? Go after it. And I had a game of my life the second half. And I spoke to him in the pub after, and I said, there were other people that were playing rubbish. Why didn't you do that to him? And he taught me a really valuable leadership lesson. He was like, I knew that would, turn you up a gear. It would put fire in your belly. You'd be maybe a bit angry at me, want to prove me wrong, but you would perform. If I did that to, and he named another player, next time they go to catch the ball, they'll drop it because they're worried that I'll shout at them again. And actually what I would do with that player is pull them aside, tell them all the things they're doing really well, and just one thing that they could do to improve their game. He said the way that you talk to people, but in what sense, is so important. because that's how you get the best. So that's where empathy plays into leadership. It's not that it removes the difficult decisions, it doesn't make you soft. Actually, the best, hardest leaders are the ones that know how to communicate effectively to the person that is in front of them for the situation that is in front of them. And that is how you should look at empathetic leadership.
Just remind us, like in a nutshell, first of all, before we go and look at some ways which we can grow and develop this skill, just remind us, like in one sentence, why does empathy matter, would you say?
Empathy is the skill that underpins all others. So if you think about leadership, communication, creativity, emotional intelligence, it is the one that is so vitally needed for all of us in our both personal and professional lives. And therefore, if you can develop it, if you can increase that skill and know how to use it, you will be able to thrive in both personal and professional lives.
Okay, so thinking back to our ratemyempathy.com quiz, if I was thinking about myself or somebody else, and I was thinking, well, my empathy level is probably around about 2 or 3, or maybe that colleague in my team, their empathy is around about 1 or 2. And I think they or I need to develop my skill of empathy. Do you think empathy is a learnable skill? Can we grow our empathy?
100%. And we've shown that. We've done some pilot research with Cambridge across a number of schools that has shown that if we increase the amount and diversity of experiences, and if we use films as a tool, that actually we can increase that level of skill of empathy. But not only that, teachers have also reported it's helped improve behaviour, it's increased global citizenship, looking at other people and cultures. There is not enough research out there, that's for sure, but the OECD does a lot of research reports on social emotional learning. They have shown that actually empathy is the one thing that if you actively try and improve it, it will turn it's the one thing that can stop bullying. Florida Atlantic University released a research report in 2022, I believe, that showed that if you actively try and increase the level of skill of empathy, you can actually stop cyberbullying. You can reduce the amount of cyberbullying, both on a racially motivated and religiously motivated basis. We have Dr. Helen Demetra, who we work with at Cambridge, independently from us, and actually how I got in touch with her is that she showed that you can increase the skill of empathy, but also if you do that, you can increase the level of creativity that students have. So it's now being documented, very much so it is a teachable skill. What we now need to do in terms of society is do that and be able to move forward and be able to develop that skill and have the resources and have the training to notice how to do that in the situation that you're in.
Okay, so it's a teachable and it's a learnable skill. So wherever we are, or wherever our students are, or our colleagues are, it's a teachable and learnable skill. So maybe you've already given us some practical examples in some of those stories, Ed. But could you just share with us maybe 2 or 3 practical ways in which teachers or leaders could work with their students or their team to help their students or team colleagues improve their empathy? 2 or 3 practical tips or tactics.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always talk about the bit of how to do this, increase the amount and diversity of experiences that you have. You will have an opportunity every week in year group assembly or in whole school assembly or whatever it is in form time to be able to tell stories. A lot of the time we give information or we bring awareness to a cause, but we're not necessarily telling stories. So one practical tip would be, if you're raising money for a charity, if you're talking about something in the news, don't just talk about the big numbers or something that's being affected. Bring in an individual story. Sometimes people say this to me and say, "Oh, empathy is biased," or "It's so individual," and they're right in a lot of respects. But actually, it's individual stories that that impact the masses. Right? Knowing someone's story in that situation is what can really dictate our actions. So there's one practical tip. Bring in more stories and make them individuals and let young people and teachers hear those stories. The second practical tip is think of empathy or using the skill of empathy as collecting human data, collecting little bits of nuggets of information about your students. We do this in our trainings. We use Slido, or you could use Mentimeter, like anonymous surveying. Now, in a school that a lot of schools don't use technology, or they don't use phones, or they don't allow this quick access, post-it notes, best thing. If you've had a break, or if it could be over a weekend, but I particularly used to use this over a 2-week break, or especially a summer break. Post-it note. You know, you're quickly trying to set up, you've got your class coming in, there's rustle and bustle everywhere. Post-it note on entry, write the best and the worst part of your holiday. Anonymous, you don't have to write your name on it, just best and worst part. Get them to do that. I hope everyone's done it, collect it. You don't have to say anything, move on with the lesson. They go out the lesson at the end, and then you can read through them. Now, what that does for you is give you a really quick overview and sense of where your class is at emotionally, work-wise. They could have written anything there. Some of them might have just drawn a drawing, scribbled things. But what it does is it gives you a quick snapshot pulse on where your class is at. And I've had this where a student has put, after Christmas, best part, I got to play drums at church. Worst part, I'm still waiting for my Christmas presents. My heart just sank. Because actually, I've been stood up there saying, over Christmas, I did this with my family, got this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm there, and I would have never known. I just assumed, you know, I wasn't being empathetic at all. I just assumed every child's had probably a great holiday, got presents. And there's one child there, and it made me reflect on the actions that I had and the way that I was speaking. A brilliant, lovely story came out of it with another teacher. I recognise the handwriting. I think I cheated a little bit. But got that young lad a Man United journal and a Marvel journal. Cost us £5 each. Kept him after school. Not in front of anyone else. No other student knew this happened. In fact, no other teachers knew it happened. Gave it to him and just said, saw your note, cheated a little bit. I've been teaching you 2 years, new handwriting. Merry Christmas. And he just looked up and went, oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, miss. And then that was it. But what was he like for me for the rest of the time? Impeccable. Beautifully behaved. And there was just like almost a little secret between us. I've got your back. I don't want you to go through that. So that came from using a post-it note. So there is such simple practical tips you can use to really understand the people and the students around you, and it can make massive differences.
We have Empathy Week coming up on the 10th to the 14th of March, Ed. I think it's the 4th or 5th year you're running this. Can you share with our listeners around the world, because I think anybody around the world can get involved in Empathy Week. So it's on the 10th to 14th of March. What is the aim of Empathy Week?
Amazing. So we just talked about increase the amount and diversity of experiences that you have. That is super hard when you're teaching your day-to-day job and you've got a million things going on. So what we do is once a year, we run Empathy Week, which is really kind of a pick and mix of different activities, tools, resources that any teacher anywhere in the world can get access to. We do live events. We've got some in London. Hopefully, maybe we'll be doing them in the Middle East one year. Who knows? But absolutely online, there is primary live assemblies. We have 3 CPD sessions online for teachers to get involved in, run by various organisations. One's to do with AI and empathy, and others to do with can we build empathy for animals with Born Free, which is a worldwide charity for animals and wildlife. And then, for example, we've also got No Isolation, talking about emotionally based school avoidance. So we've got great training for teachers. We also have online primary assemblies, as I've said. We also have our Empathy Studios as our umbrella organisation that helps run the festival. We have some of our film-based materials that you can simply download, use and experience. Again, meet someone through film, and that is age differentiated for 5 to 18 years old. So there's an abundance of resources. It's free, and you can access this at empathy-week.com. Go on there, register for free, take part. You might use one thing, you might use a lot of it, but it's March 10th to the 14th, as you said, Kai. And we hope to get you involved. We had 300,000 students, just over 300,000 students from 48 countries last year participating, and we're hoping to build on that.
And why should schools get involved, Ed?
It's free. We all love a freebie, don't we? We all love a freebie, but it's genuinely really high quality content that enables you to have these discussions with your class and actually focus on what empathy is. And don't get me wrong, we don't actually, although it's got empathy in the name, it's on the tin. It's not just empathy, empathy, empathy. It's learning about two film-based resources we've got, for example, are an amazing young woman called Moni. She talks about music and the power of music and her spark. Our theme is "What's your spark?" Sorry, I should have said that. So it's exploring what people's sparks are, what gets them going, but also enables children and students to talk about theirs. And what I always say is use it. See it, try it out. Is your assembly made for that week or more? Try it with your school. Have those discussions with your kids. You'll probably be surprised at the conversations that come out of this. We're providing the material, but the conversations that will come out in each classroom will be different. And that in itself is an empathy building process. Hearing, listening to your students, what do they care about? So get involved and give it a go.
Okay, so there's plenty of time still to get involved, 10th to the 14th of March. And just remind our listeners where to go to get these free resources.
So they just need to go to www.empathy-week.com and you'll be able to click on register at the top there, get access almost immediately.
And it's all free.
All free.
I mean, I'm often told there's no such thing as a free lunch, but this sounds like it's a free lunch.
It's a free lunch and dessert, I would say, maybe a bit more, with leftovers for tomorrow. It's okay. We do it in a way. We found a business model where we have partners and sponsors, and we make it as easy as possible. Nothing runs for free, but we're offering it for free, and I think that's the value that we've got for you.
Okay, so this is a free banquet, not just a free lunch of empathy resources that can be used by students of all ages.
Yep, so teachers have the access. We try and make it super simple. So you just need one lead teacher that can register, get access to the materials, and then the differentiation for the resources is from age 5 to 18. Wow. Excuse me. So we're not in early years just yet, but age 5 to 18. And we also have something I haven't mentioned. We have confirmed speakers as well. So we have an on-demand speaker series. So think of it as a bit like TEDx meets empathy. 5 speakers that you can listen to at any point in time and use as an assembly as well.
Okay, well that sounds absolutely fantastic. So just say that website address one more time so people have got hold of that, and we'll also make sure that's in the show notes. But the link is
www.empathy-week.com.
Brilliant. And there you can get a whole suite of resources completely free of charge, no catch whatsoever. Ed, sounds like your gift to the world.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that, and we obviously have our program with Empathy Studios if schools want to get involved with it more. But this is something I'm super passionate about. Coming back to what I said at the start about the U Gang, where were those opportunities to do amazing things? Where were they when I needed them? And I think what we've seen with us growing over 5 years now, we're going into our 6th year, is that teachers come back year on year, and therefore we must be doing something right because it's needed, it's wanted, and I think the world needs it as well, more now than ever.
We are now moving into what we call on the Educators Corner podcast as the bottom line it round. And I guess this is sort of linked to empathy in that, when we may be a bit pushed for time, we're a bit tired, and we just want a really short, concise, to the point answer, we can say, bottom line it, Ed. Just get to the point. So we're looking for concise and to the point answers. One word is okay, no more than one sentence. So here we go. 5 questions in the bottom line it round. Are you ready to bottom line it, Ed?
I think so. Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Okay, question number 1. What's the biggest leadership lesson that you keep on having to learn?
To create and block time with my team to build relationships and not talk about work.
Number 2, a key moment in your leadership journey that made you think differently.
The U Gang.
And what made you think differently? What changed?
I think the U Gang and understanding that my world is completely different and that I may never fully understand their world.
What's your favourite way to unwind at the end of a busy day as founder and CEO of Empathy Week and Empathy Studios, Ed?
I'll just go with Netflix, shall
I? Not Taylor Swift.
Not Taylor Swift, no. Netflix, right. Apple TV, slouching.
And your favourite show of the last year, or your favourite box set?
One thing I'm really enjoying, which is empathy related at the moment, bit of Ted Lasso. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's a great series on Apple TV. Lots of empathy in there.
Question 4. Leadership is
the ability to understand and communicate with the nuances of the people that are around you successfully.
And finally, it's my favourite question, is question number 5. The purpose of education should be to
entertain, enthuse, inspire young people for a world that we don't yet know exists.
Brilliant. Well, Ed, thank you so much for being on the Educators Corner podcast today. You have certainly inspired and enthused us around this very important skill, empathy. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. And thank you for all that you are doing to support young people, to support schools right around the world in this very important skill area. Is there, before we go, anything finally that you would like to say before we close down this episode?
I think just one thing for those that are listening, which will be the teachers, which will be the educators, and they're thinking, great, we've talked about students, but what about myself? And I would say for you to develop the skill of empathy yourself is probably one of the most important things, because if you do it, you will be able to do it with your students. And practically that can be changing up your algorithm on social media, following different people, following accounts you may not agree with, speaking to people, watching different films that you might not enjoy, listening to different music, dare I say Taylor Swift if you don't really listen to Taylor Swift a lot of the time. Just increase the amount and diversity of experiences that you have yourself, because that will increase your perspective on the world and you will therefore be more empathetic. And I think we need that in our educators more than anyone else, to be honest.
Great advice to conclude, Ed. Thank you so much for being with us today, and good luck with Empathy Week 2025. Take care.
Thank you very much, Kai.
You've been listening to the Educators Corner podcast, the show that brings you conversations with educators from all over the world, the podcast where we stay curious for just a little bit longer. The Educators Corner podcast is hosted by me, Kai Vasher, and produced by Stuart Pardo, Zoe Snell, and Marion James, and by BSM BSS Productions.